Do you ever feel like you just want to throw it all in and quit your job as a Java developer? Well, today's episode has got you covered as we look at what you can do when you start seeing that red mist. Java Easy. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer. Just before we get started and get into this, if you're completely new to Java and you haven't yet grabbed your Java Beginner Starter Kit, which is available on our website, just hop along over there. It's javaeasily.com on the homepage and you'll be able to grab it and download it from there. It's completely free and it's designed for complete and total absolute beginners. It's a super helpful guide. It's just going to help you get up and running with Java programming really quickly. Okay, let's get back into the show then. So yeah, what do you do when you want to quit? There's times when we all want to quit. It's something that's very natural. It's a normal thing that you want to quit from time to time. And I think it happens really with anything that's long-term. Yeah, so whenever you do something that's long-term, or whenever you're involved with something that's long-term, you go through kind of ups and downs. Sometimes you're inspired, you're on one of the ups if you like, and you're really loving it, you're getting into the technology, you seem to be flying through the code like there's no tomorrow and that kind of thing. And then sometimes you're in a bit of a low. Sometimes you kind of ground down, you feel like you're in a bit of a rut and that kind of thing. And yeah, that's only natural, really, to be honest. I think what it is really is that like as humans, we crave variety. And if we don't get variety in whatever long-term endeavor we're doing or long-term relationship with something that we have, if we don't have that variety, then sometimes it can leave us feeling a bit stale and we can feel like we're in a rut and we don't really know how to get out of that. So there are ways to get variety, which we'll explore shortly. But I think the key point is when it's continuous though, because we all have these ups and downs from time to time, but the key point is that when it's continuous and you're continually not feeling good about things, then there might be a cause for that. Not a cause for concern necessarily, but just an opportunity to kind of pause and reflect properly about, is this the right career for you? Because it might be and it might not be. So, we're going to explore that in today's episode. So the first thing to think of is, what alternatives do you have? Okay. So if you do want to get out of your job, always do it prudently. Don't just throw it all in at once. If there's something else that you're interested in or you might want to do, take some courses, seek out opportunities, talk to people in that industry, whatever it takes. But you have to approach any decision about your career path. You don't take it lightly. You have to have a reasoned kind of approach to how you navigate sensibly any changes that you make. Now, maybe you don't need to break from IT altogether. Maybe it's not IT as a sector that you work in or as an area that you work in. Maybe that's not the issue. Maybe it's actually just coding. So maybe coding is not for you, or you're not gelling with coding, or you just find it too difficult, or you find it boring and monotonous. That's also possible as well. Not everybody enjoys programming. I mean, I love programming as it happens. Whenever I get an opportunity to do like a really large piece of code or something, or a large work piece, if you like, at work or in any of the contracts that I do, it's really interesting. And it just really absorbs me. I find it a very absorbing thing doing software engineering. I genuinely love the craft of software engineering, but it's not for everybody. Sometimes it can be perceived as boring and just, when things just don't gel with you or they don't vibe with you kind of thing. If that's the case, then maybe you could try something else. For example, you could try a business analyst role, so try to get into a BA type function. Or you could look at doing testing roles as well. So you could become a QA or a quality assurance engineer or a tester inside a project as well. That's also possible. Another thing to think about is that maybe it's actually a specific type of coding that you don't like, or rather that you don't really resonate with. And then in which case you could think about, are there ways which I could change the type of coding that I do? So an example of this would be if you don't like core Java and you're in a core Java role, then maybe you want to go and do some enterprise Java. You want to start having a play with things like Spring and Hibernate and that kind of thing. Or if you don't like web development, then you could go and do the opposite and then go to core Java, and then you forget about things like MVC stuff and servlets and JSPs or HTML, CSS or whatever, if you're a full stack developer, whatever it might be, or Angular, React, whatever it might be. If that's not resonating with you, then maybe just look for a different type of technology or a different tech stack to go with. So that can be an option as well. And at the very least, even changing then to a different tech stack or a technology option, at least that'll give you an opportunity to evaluate whether it's coding in general or whether it's just coding in that specific area. So that can be useful as well. So you might want to start considering the different types of projects when you're looking for jobs to see if you can get different roles which involve different technologies or different tech stacks. Maybe you haven't considered this before and you're thinking a job's a job kind of thing. But yeah, just look more creatively with the project type and the tools and technologies. Just have those kind of like in mind when you look for new jobs, if you want to jump ship to a different company. Because sometimes you can actually get a different project inside the same company. And you might want to have a chat with your manager about that, or tech lead or whatever. But ultimately you want to find something that resonates with you. And if you don't know what resonates with you, or you don't have an idea of what might resonate with you, then just make a change. Make some changes, keep changing until something kind of sticks and something gels. Now, sometimes we're just bored with technology. I had a difficulty once where I took a long break from IT. I took a year off and I went to the south of France on the French Riviera to a place called Antibes and Juan-les-Pins. Very nice time. I went to learn French randomly, as you do, when I was in my 20s. And obviously that's a joke that you do because not everybody does that. But yeah, it was something that I wanted to do and I wanted to have a bit of a break and everything. And when I came back, from this amazing kind of year off living in France. When I came back, I remember I picked up a book on web services because that was like the hot topic which contracts were requesting at the time. And it was the driest book I've ever read or ever tried to read. And I'm not sure if it's because of the amount of time that I was away from the topic out of IT, which I think is a large part of it, to be honest, probably 75% of it. But also web services in general is pretty dull as far as technology goes. And yeah, I found it pretty difficult to get back into it. It wasn't like I picked up the book and then I was instantly back in the zone kind of thing. It takes you a while to get back into things. And I used to buy so many books before, these ROX books, WROX, that was a publisher in the early 2000s. And they used to have these kind of red books with like yellow writing, pictures of the authors on the front as well, I recall. And yeah, I'd have like literally dozens of these books. I want to say hundreds. It's probably less than 200, so I can't really say hundreds, but dozens of these books where I used to just read voraciously, just trying to understand and learn as much about technology as possible at that particular time. And I do so now as well. But given the fact that I was from that background of like really enjoying technology one minute, then I had a massive gap, and then I came back and then I just couldn't get into it, that can be a bit of a shock to the system, as it were, as well. So I think you have to regularly keep doing something to be involved with it, and you have to be able to do it at a deep enough level so that the interest starts to take over and then momentum carries forward. And when you have a break, I guess you kind of, lose that momentum. So I think the longer the break or gap, the more difficult it is to regain that interest level. It's a bit like inertia. Inertia is the resistance of an object to change in movement. So pushing a car, for example, is difficult at first, but once it gets going and you get over that hump of initially getting the thing moving, once it gets going, you overcome the inertia, then it just keeps moving and it's got that momentum then to keep carrying forward. And I think that's exactly the same thing when you compare it to like your interest level in a particular technology or in Java. So just keep being refueled by continually keeping at it, seeing new ways of doing things, encountering new APIs or frameworks, and they make you see things differently. And then with that, you get this momentum and then you keep going. And don't have a year off as well, because that makes it more difficult to get back in. Obviously take time off, but just be aware of that. Now, sometimes it's just not you. Sometimes it can be the team. I remember I once went to work at a company and it seemed amazing on paper. The interview went great. The tech lead, who'd been my boss, actually looked like one of my best friends at the time, which kind of makes you visualize them as that maybe. And the company was great. It was a startup. It was Friday working from home. It was technology-wise, it was using Groovy and Grails, and it was on a Mac with sit-stand desks and all that kind of thing. Absolutely awesome. And I thought that was going to be like an absolute dream job. Certainly on paper, it felt to me at the time that it was going to be like a dream job. But I was miserable. I was really miserable in this job. I was with 4 developers and, the money was pretty good. Contract role in a different part of town too. It was in Victoria. So it seemed like it was going to be, that's also interesting as well to have that kind of variety, because normally I was working in the city in Canary Wharf or Bank, so the fact that it was in a different part of town, using all these technologies that I loved and that kind of thing, it seemed like it was going to be the dream job. But yeah, I was working with these 4 developers and, they were very cliquish. They all drank together. I couldn't because I had a 2-year-old. They all had these kind of like inside jokes, and every day when I walked into that place, I just felt really bad and felt really depressed that I was just there. And I didn't want to be there. I felt like an absolute outsider. And every day when I got back home, I felt really depressed by this job. And so thankfully I managed to get out of that job. But sometimes, the moral of the story here is you just don't fit. And it's okay to recognize that, If you're in a job and you just don't fit or your face doesn't fit or something, then it's not you. Just have the courage to be able to cut your losses and go somewhere else. Go somewhere where you'll be appreciated. You don't have to stay in a role just because you feel you have to stay in a role. And also, some people stay in roles because they think that they've just started a new company and they've only been there, for example, like 3 or 4 weeks, and they're like, I really don't like this, I really want to get out, but I can't get out because if I do, it looks bad on a CV, so I've got to put in at least 6 months or maybe a year so it doesn't look bad on a CV. No, I'm sorry. Your mental health is much more important. And also as well, you have to get out when you feel you need to get out. If something's not working, it's just not working. And also, if you convincingly state why you left the previous role when you go for interviews, nobody's going to hold it against you. Nobody's going to look at your CV and say, oh, it's got a gap here of 6 weeks or he was only at this place rather for 6 weeks, and so therefore he's a flake or he's flaky or whatever. People are people, and it's possible you can go to a role, you just don't fit, you just don't gel, you don't like the team, whatever it is, just move on. It's perfectly fine. Don't feel the pressure, don't feel the need to stay in a job that you don't like just because you haven't been there very long. Just move on, cut your losses, and get out while you can. Best thing to do. So never stay somewhere just because you feel you have to. So to summarize, if the job's not right for you, see if you can somehow mold it into a better fit. So a different project type, different technology maybe, different team, maybe even a different company. If coding altogether isn't a great fit, or you feel it's not a great fit, then try one of the other roles around coding or aligned to coding. So BA, tester, project manager, or scrum master maybe if you're a little bit older and you've got a bit more experience in your belt possibly. But whatever you do, think carefully about it, but don't be afraid to take the next step. Never be afraid to take the next step, whatever that is. Now that about wraps it up for this episode. Thanks for staying with me. Until next time, have a great day, happy coding, and speak soon. Bye.